You know, there's one question that everyone, at some point, asks themselves. What happens after we die? It's maybe the biggest mystery there is. Today, we're going to dig into a source that spent almost 3 decades trying to find an answer, not through faith, but through what it calls evidence.
For most of human history, right, this question belonged to priests and philosophers. But what if you try to tackle it like a cold case? Like you were gathering clues, data points, eyewitness accounts, all pointing toward an answer.
And that's exactly what the Friday Afterlife Report has been doing. For 27 years, this weekly online publication has been collecting a massive archive of claims, all about the survival of consciousness after death. So let's take a look inside and see what they've found.
All right, first up is a really fascinating category: voices through technology. The idea here is that the very devices we use every day could actually be a bridge to, well, somewhere else.
The report starts with something called electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. The whole concept is this. You hit record in a silent room. You hear nothing, but when you play it back, a voice is there that you didn't hear in the moment. According to the source, people are trying this all the time, even with just their phones, hoping to connect with loved ones.
So the report then takes this idea and kind of levels it up. It makes a distinction between that basic EVP and something much more advanced. It calls instrumental transcommunication, or ITC. As you can see, EVP is mostly about short one-way messages, but ITC, that's described as actual two-way conversations using all kinds of tech: radios, TVs, computers, you name it.
Now, to back this up, the report often points to researchers who spent their lives on this. A key figure they mention is Father Francois Brune. And yeah, you heard that right, a Catholic priest who wrote a bestseller on this and claimed to have collected thousands of these electronic messages himself.
And this is where the claims get really specific. For instance, the report talks about a researcher, dead for 20 years, who supposedly made a bunch of phone calls to his old colleagues. And get this, a text file then mysteriously showed up on an offline computer to confirm it all. The source also describes entire groups in the afterlife, like one called the Big Circle, supposedly made up of children helping their parents get messages through.
Okay, so we've talked about technology. Now let's shift gears from machines to the mind. The next category of evidence is all about personal experience. Journeys of consciousness, or accounts of seeing things beyond the physical body.
A huge piece of this puzzle is the near-death experience, or NDE. The report zeroes in on a book that gathered 128 cases where people were clinically dead, no heartbeat, no brainwaves, but later described things that happened in the room with stunning accuracy. Conversations between doctors, what people were wearing, details they couldn't possibly have known, but that were later confirmed to be true.
But it's not all just numbers. The report really leans into personal stories, like Anita Morjani's. Her experience of an NDE while in a coma is presented as more than just evidence. It's a story about transformation, about completely losing the fear of death, and in turn, the fear of living. And it's not just NDEs. The report also dives into out-of-body experiences. It features people like Jürgen Ziewe, an artist who says he spent 50 years consciously exploring these other realms, and has even created detailed illustrations of the worlds he claims to have visited.
All right, so we've got technology. We've got consciousness. The report's third major pillar of evidence is where things get, well, physical. This is about claims of actual tangible manifestations.
This whole section really focuses on a super rare form of mediumship known as direct voice. The claim here is that spirit voices can speak directly into a room, not through the medium's mouth, but through some kind of external voice box. It's said to be made from a substance called ectoplasm, which is described as a temporary physical material that comes from the medium's body. And the report is just packed with these historical figures. You have Leslie Flint, a famous medium whose recordings you can still go listen to online. You have researchers like Montague Keen, who supposedly showed up at a seance after his own death. And maybe most compellingly, you have respected scientists like Sir William Crookes, who set out to debunk all this stuff, but, according to the source, ended up totally convinced it was real.
So after laying out all these different claims, from technology to consciousness to physical phenomena, the report gets to its central question, the standard of proof. At what point is evidence enough? To frame the whole debate, the report's author, who's a lawyer himself, uses this really interesting legal analogy. See, in a civil court case, you just have to prove something is more likely than not, basically 51% certain.
But for a criminal conviction, the bar is way higher, beyond a reasonable doubt. So the argument being made is, why not judge all this collected evidence against one of these same standards?
And it's not just the author's idea. The report pulls in quotes from other legal professionals, like the barrister Maria Ahern here. The message is basically, act like you're on a jury. Look at everything that's been presented, weigh it all, and then come to your own verdict.
Now, to be fair, the report does address the main scientific counterargument, especially for things like those EVP recordings. And that argument is pareidolia. It's our brain's amazing, but sometimes tricky, ability to find patterns in random noise, like seeing faces in the clouds or hearing words in static. This is presented as the go-to skeptical explanation for a lot of these claims.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, the Afterlife Report is casting this incredibly wide net. It's pulling together claims from electronic gadgets, deep personal experiences, and even supposed physical events, and it's weaving them all together into one cumulative case for life after death. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question. Whether you buy into any of this evidence or not, what does this relentless 27-year search for it tell us about ourselves? What does it say about our deep, maybe even universal need to know what happens when the lights go out for good?